Welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast, dedicated to parents and anyone else who loves someone in active addiction. Education is a powerful tool in breaking down stigma, fostering understanding, and ultimately helping individuals and their loved ones navigate the challenges of addiction. With Donna Marston, author of Peeling the Onion and Sharing Without Shame. So take a deep breath and grab some tissues as we uncover the stories of love, courage, and unwavering support in the face of adversity, as Donna and her guests share their stories without shame. Because when we share our stories without shame, we inspire others to do the same.
Hello, and welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast. I'm your host, Donna Marston, author of Sharing Without Shame, certified recovery support worker, and family recovery advocate. I'm dedicated to helping parents navigate the challenges of addiction in their family with clarity and confidence. You can find my books about codependency and unhealthy helping at www.sharingwithoutshame.com and on amazon.com. Today's episode is sponsored by Snap Bands. This is my Snap Band. It says blessing. And these are behavior therapy bracelets that integrate gentle physical sensation by just giving it a snap that will snap you out of a bad attitude, out of a craving, or whatever's going on. To order your Snap Band, go to snapbands.com. That's SNAPPBANDZ. And in the comments, write SWOS or Sharing Without Shame. Today, I would like to introduce you to Jason Shiers, a certified transformative coach who is passionate about helping people breaking free from suffering. Jason guides individuals towards profound inner transformation, blending deep psychological insights and creative innovation. His unique approach empowers clients to uncover lasting well-being, navigating life's challenges with clarity, and embrace a more fulfilling, authentic experience. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. First thing I ask everybody is, what would you like to share without shame?
I think the fact it's like an opposite. When you talk about sharing without shame, your mind immediately goes to what's the worst thing that I've done that I can feel free to share about. Up until about 10 years ago, I was completely anonymous, like online. You couldn't find me, didn't know anything about me, even though I've been working with people with addiction for over 25 years now. But it was because I never wanted, because I had these parallel careers. I had an IT career and I was also a therapist working with addiction, but I never wanted anyone to be able to go on Google and find anything out about me because I was going for jobs that was worked for a company that was to do with financial investments. If they would have known that I'd been in jail, it would have never got the job. So I kept my whole life hidden. And I was at this creative training event in LA, actually, in Santa Monica. And we did this exercise where one guy became my assistant for 2 hours. He said, okay, I can be your assistant for 2 hours. I can do anything for you. And I said, oh, what about get me on some podcasts, And he went, yeah, he says, I know somebody. So from that moment of that creative experiment, he got me on this podcast where I shared my story for the first time online. And then I put my name into Google and this podcast popped up, depression, addiction, and suicide or something like that, and I was thinking, shit, now my story is out there, and it was like, but since then I've shared everything openly. So I got nothing to have any shame about, and I'm very open about and willing to share what struggles and darkness I've been through in service of it being useful to somebody else to hear that there's hope, at the end of that experience.
And one thing I learned the hard way is that we're sick as our secret. As long as we keep that secret, it keeps us suppressed and our voice, it keeps everything just stifled. And that's not cool. And like you, I did the same thing. I didn't want anybody to know. And then all of a sudden it was like, who cares?
Yeah.
And our stories can help one person today, then we've done what we're meant to do just for today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you tell a little bit about your pathway to recovery? Because I think that's important for families to hear, because when they're hopeless they can't always find that hope to hold on to. And I love when people share their pathway of how they found their recovery, what worked for them, and how they move forward, and then bring it into like step by step how you did it.
Yeah. And for me, there's multiple aha moments, there's God divine interventions, like there's multiple insights into the nature of suffering, into my willingness to look inwardly versus outwardly, and to accept help, like to say, okay, I got a problem, and I guess that was the first part, was really saying, okay, I'll go to rehab. It was like, like someone asking me and me saying yes. And before that, before that first time into rehab, I mean, my life was pretty, it was trauma driven because my father was killed when I was young, when I was just 5 years old. And ever since then, addiction became my friend, my kind of loyal, reliable, consistent escape from myself, from my life, from the journey of being me on a daily basis. So obviously when you eat too much food, you gain a lot of weight, so I ballooned in weight. And by the time I was 10 years old, I was in the psychiatric system and medicated for depression. And after that, sectioned multiple times in psychiatric hospitals, prisons, and institutions. My life was just pure chaos, homelessness, devastation, really. Nobody knew what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with myself, to be honest. I'm surprised that I stayed alive, but it was a life of violence and crime and chaos and in and out of prisons, until that first moment when I said, yeah, okay, then I'll go to rehab, And I really only said yes because I thought if I could stop taking heroin, then I would be okay. It's like I had this delusion, if you want, that I would lay in a bed with a PlayStation and somebody would drop Valium into my mouth 4 times a day, and I would feel all relaxed and go through this process of withdrawal. Then I would leave rehab and I would get a job and I would drink on a weekend and everything would be fine. It's like that was my own kind of reasoning for going, okay, then it sounds better than what I've got, because by this point I was stealing joints of meat and bacon and cheese out of supermarkets and getting arrested on a regular basis, trying to survive, living in a homeless shelter, So that was when I first went to rehab. I lived in a homeless shelter. And so, yeah, so I accepted when someone said to me, oh, you're an addict, you've got the disease of addiction, I just blindly accepted that. I just said, yeah, okay, then if that's what it is, because you people are professionals, right? And you must know better than me, so you need to go to meetings for the rest of your life, and you need to never drink and use again, one day at a time for the rest of your life, which still works for some of my friends, it's stuff, but it's not what I do anymore, but it's where I started my journey.
Yep.
And for 22 years, unquestioned, I went to 12-step meetings saying I'm an addict, without actually knowing whether it was true. I just was told that and I believed it, and I thought it was the only way to recover. In the meantime, I went on a journey to becoming a psychotherapist, and in my own true, what I call terminal, unique fashion, it's kind of like I just went for the hardest qualifications, the longest qualifications, and one after another, after another, after another, until I got to this point where I thought, God, I've got all these qualifications, in transactional analysis, in CBT, in person-centered therapy. I've done the Hoffman process, I've done Tony Robbins, and I'm still miserable. I'm still miserable. I still don't have a sense. Yeah, I don't have a sense of freedom in my heart. I don't even know what it's like to have a healthy relationship. I don't know what it's like to stop craving. And actually, all my friends, not all, but a large percentage of my friends were addiction counselors. They were all still had secret addictions. I had secret addictions. We went to meetings and we said everything was great. And then when people met up and confided in me, they told me about being unfaithful in their relationship. They told me about obsessing about prostitutes. They told me about gambling and secret addictions that they had that no one really admitted in the open. So there was me there, because I was in my kind of communities. I've always been the longest person clean. I've been 30 years free of my addiction now. So people confided in me, but that left me with the knowing that, well, hold on a minute. All these people are working with people with addictions, yet none of them have really stopped, and it's kind of like, and it doesn't look to me that any of these people have got what I really want, which is freedom. So I had this kind of I call it the pilot light. On the boiler, you see the little light when the boiler's out and stuff, and you
Yep.
turn the gas up and it all lights up. I call it like the pilot light of hope, that we all have inside of us. There's that little spark of hope. And it kept me searching, And people in 12 steps and therapy world used to say to me, you need to stop searching. That's your problem. Searching is your problem. That's your addiction, searching for something. And it is true that we search in the wrong things. We search in
Mhm.
relationships, in money, in food, in external objects, in progression, in bigger houses, in bigger cars. It's true, but it's because we
Yeah.
don't understand the nature of our seeking. We don't understand the longing for connection to our own heart inside ourselves. And it just manifests as a seeking for things because we haven't embraced ourself, our true self. We haven't embraced who we are. We're still running away from that in some form because that's what a lot of traditional recovery models are. They're like they stop taking drugs and alcohol, but they just pick up every other addiction that's socially acceptable. The gym, that's a good addiction. No,
Right.
none of it's a good addiction. All of
Yeah.
it's an escape from yourself. So that led me to to a second kind of pivotal point, where I had like what I would call a spiritual awakening. Because it's interesting because in the 12th step, we talk about having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. But I was clueless, If you've had a spiritual awakening, you know about it and you can talk about it to people.
Yep.
If you haven't, you'll spend all day using the mind, the onboard computer that we have, that's thinking generating, to talk about what a spiritual awakening is, but you'll never fully understand it. You won't know what it is on a felt sense. So having spent 22 years talking about this spiritual awakening that I wondered if I'd had or hadn't had, or I was meant to have, or I'd done something wrong, or I'd missed something in the 4th step, or I'd missed something on the journey, or I didn't pray properly, or I didn't sponsor enough people, or I didn't do enough meetings or service, or whatever it was. I had this realization in my own mind overnight. It was like, oh, in a moment, where everything, my whole life changed. And by
Yeah.
this point, I was 22 years clean and I was still suffering. Relationships were unhealthy. My relationship with money was unhealthy. My relationship with my body was most unhealthy because, like I said, food was my first addiction. So I picked up food, progressed to drugs, ended up as a heroin addict. But as soon as I got clean, I went back to food because it was socially acceptable and
Right.
ballooned in weight. And then to try and offset the weight, I ended up having 7 cosmetic surgeries in 7 different clinics, like trying to change the outside of my body to fix the internal dis-ease that I had with myself. So all this
Mm.
stuff had been happening until I had this momentary experience where I realized that, like, who am I? It was like this question of seeing that there's a relationship that's going on inside of me where I am not my thoughts. It's like I am not the Jason that I think I am. I'm not the damaged addict, broken, years of mental health problems. That's not me. That's a creation of my own mind. And actually, I've always been okay. And I've always had this story running in my mind. And I'm suffering and escaping on a daily basis on behalf of a story that I hold about myself that's not me. It's not happening now. The trauma of my father and what happened, and all the stuff that happened in the years after that in my childhood and stuff, and and actually, it only exists as a story in my mind, and later what I found as a somatic tension in the body. It's like so. My second realization of that moment was very freeing, to a point where I probably spent 2 years in complete bliss of like just free, joyful, happy, content. I stopped going to meetings at that point at 22 years clean, which was about 8 years ago. Yeah, my life changed unrecognizably in that awakening experience, and that's
Mm.
really what was the precursor for my work for my Infinite Recovery Project book that's about to be released. Was really helping people find total freedom, not whack-a-mole. I call whack-a-mole recovery. Is where you put down one thing and then you pick up another, and you put down something else and you pick something else. That tends to be what traditional recovery experience is like for people. So it's not whack-a-mole recovery. It's like total freedom, and that's really well, I've dedicated my life to sharing with people, that how to find complete freedom from yourself.
Now, when you were going through all of this, did you have anybody in your family supporting you in any way?
No, is the truth. I think the damage that I did in early life. I mean, I've got children now, 15 and 8 years old, you know, and so I realize, you know, I feel quite touched by it, you know, that I feel compassion for my mum now. You know, it's like because I realize how challenging it can be to be a parent. But for years, you know, I just felt bitterness because what happened with my dad. And then she left me, really. You know, it's kind of like, I don't say that in a blaming way. I say that in a way that in order to cope with her own grief, you know, in that moment, that she just got stuck into work. And that was her way of coping with it. And I
So she left
blamed,
you emotionally, not
yeah.
physically.
And I felt resentful about that for many years, you know,
Sure.
until I became a parent, started realizing the difficulty of what it's like and how much it pulls on your heartstrings. And then knowing how difficult I was as a child, you know, like I thought, shit, God, I wouldn't be able to cope with me, you know?
My son says that
Yeah.
because he has three little boys now, and he's like, boy.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it all shakes out, and how we change, and coming from where you were to where you are. Now you work throughout the country or just in the United Kingdom, and you work with people who are in early recovery. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm just about to launch my book. I've been working with people all over the world for quite a long time. It can be families and it can be people suffering. And I'm about to put together a training program for therapists and for treatment centers because I'm really offering a complete paradigm shift in how we look at addiction, you know. And I like that's why I liked in your write-up that you said about getting rid of the stigma, because I'm about to create a documentary, I think, about getting rid of the stigma of addiction because the subtitle of my book is The Intelligence of Addiction, you know, and it is really seeing that it's not a faulty wiring, it's not a part of us that's flawed or broken that wants to kill us, you know, that's as it's often been portrayed in the disease model concept. But really, it's an adaptive intelligence to our early life adversity, you know, a way of coping with our internal world in relation to an external world that is challenging, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a very good way at soothing, you know, our internal world. It's an intelligent way of soothing our internal world, and if you start to look at addiction through the lens of intelligence, you know, it's kind of like then the stigma breaks down. You know, it's not a flaw. It's no longer something that's faulty with you. It's like a if you've experienced it, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a real bad trauma, you know. It can we all get as parents, I know this now, you know, we all mess our kids up to some extent, you know. It's kind of like we can't help it because we can't be perfect. We can't fulfill every need of our child, you know.
And they're watching us grow up too.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah,
also maturing as
yeah,
we're adulting and getting older, and so there's different stages that we go through naturally, and our
yeah,
kids watching that thinking, oh, mom and dad, they're perfect, they know how to do everything, and
yeah,
when we're not, and we
yeah.
don't.
In response to that adversity in early life, we find coping mechanisms. You know, it's like where our needs are not met. Perhaps our parents can't see us. We're like, "Hey, mom, dad, I want your attention," and they go, "No, no, I'm busy. I'm on the phone," or whatever it is these days. You know, and then there's this internal need of the child that's not met. You know, there's this longing for connection. So they find a way to soothe it because children are infinitely resilient, you know. So the way they find is an escape, you know, an escape into fantasy in early life and sex, relationships, drugs, alcohol as they get older, you know. So it's just an innocent and adaptive, intelligent response to that level of adversity that we experience. And I don't want to blame any parents here because I'm a parent that's done the same, and I don't want to make it look bad. Some of us in childhood have been through worse, more difficult. I've met many clients been through rape, violence, abuse, trauma, tragedy, loss, you know, all sorts of things that have happened to people. And it's not a comparison, you know, we all live in our own relative experience here. And however you adapted to find comfort within yourself, you know, is really usually what it is. And for some of us, it's that experience of constant oblivion that we long for, you know, escape from ourselves. You know, once we
Mhm.
find one drink or drug that does that job for us, you know, it's like then we just continue doing it until we have a divine intervention, you know.
Yeah, and you want to, that fight or flight mode that you're in as a child, as an adult, whatever, whether you're the person with a substance use disorder or the parent, that just takes us down. And in my opinion, because I don't like the stigma, I don't like the shaming and blaming. And so like you, I'm trying to change things and shift things by using different languages. So for example, when people would come to my meetings, and I'll never forget, this new mom comes in, and this other mother, I caught her with her finger in her face going, "You're codependent, and you're enabling." And I'm thinking, oh dear God, this woman will never come back again. We should be loving and kind. And all in the name of love, we're blamed and shamed for loving our kids when they're in active addiction. And so instead of calling people codependent, calling them enablers, I find it's much easier when I'm working with my clients to talk about what's unhealthy helping, and that's doing for our child what they could and should do for themselves. Can you
Yeah,
speak to that at all?
yeah, I can.
Do that at all?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd like to like look down the chain, it's kind of like, so if you use the model that I'm talking about, like that escape from self is an intelligent body mind response to some level of adversity that's happened in the nervous system, then exactly the same thing is happening in the parent. That like, but the focus is not drugs or alcohol, it's the child. It's kind of like, so it seems that if I could just help this child, that would reflect back on me and I would ease my own internal dis-ease. So I want to take the stigma and the shame away a step further, that it's like, yeah, that is unhealthy helping, so to speak, if you want to look at it that way, but it's also a normal response to adversity for the parent. So that's why in my work, in my process, I want to work with the families as well as the people suffering, because I want to help them see that, that like, because they're caught up in this, if he could just change, if she could just change, if they could just get them to get clean, then I would be okay. That's never the case, because all that happens is when they do get clean, you feel lost and you can't control anymore and you can't advise and criticize and do all the things that you were doing to escape yourself. It's kind of like, so you're left then with an empty void inside yourself in the same way that someone stops using is left with an empty void inside themselves. So this is just like explaining codependency and kind of unhealthy helping in a more, as I see it, a more trauma kind of intelligence language. It's just really looking at what's the real cause of this. Quite often, like all of us have lived through some level of adversity. We didn't get our needs met, we were not seen, one parent left, our parents separated, whatever we experienced, like through perception, not through the fact that it looks violent to everyone, but just through our own perception. If it was traumatic that your parent was not there, then it was traumatic for you. It's not for anyone else to say that. Then you have that experience inside you. Then when you have a child and then they start to, their life becomes threatened to you as a parent, it's kind of like, oh my God, like what lengths will a parent go to try and stop that, right? Because it feels so uncomfortable. But it's a beautiful invitation to the parent, and when parents come to me, quite often they always come to me and they say, can you help my child? And the first question I'll ask is like, have you asked them if they want help? And it's kind of like, and they'll say something like, well, yeah, so I think they do,
I
it's
told them
always,
they needed it.
yeah. So I say, I tell you what, I need to speak to you first. I'll help you first. And it's like, it turns out like quite a lot of the time that one, the child doesn't want help at that point. It's kind of like, so it's the parent that's struggling with being with the child while they're in their active addiction, So we can really help parents to be more present and able to listen to the child when they need it, when the time comes, because we don't know when that time's going to come, right? When they're ready to say, you know what, I want help now. Okay, I'm here. I'm listening.
Right.
Let me
Yeah.
hear about it,
Yeah. And, I always say, hold on to your hope, because as long as your loved ones still walking on this earth, you never know when the miracle of recovery is going to happen. And,
True.
and I found too that we mimic each other's behavior very often.
Yeah.
If you look at like the cycle of addiction, it's like a cat and mouse chase. When my son's irritable, restless, and discontent, and he's off and running, I'm following him. I'm getting agitated, irritable. I'm feeling helpless and hopeless. And then the consequences start. And then he promises me the world. I promise if you bail me out, if you do this, I'll go to treatment, blah, 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 talking the talk. and I'm cautiously optimistic. And as soon as he gets irritable, restless, and discontent, off we go again. The parents are always chasing the kids. And I'm
Yeah.
talking adult children, teen children, whatever.
Yeah.
And at some point, we have to step out of the cycle
Yeah.
because that's the insanity. We're doing the same thing over and over again. And someone has to step outside. And it doesn't mean you stop loving them. You learn how to have a healthier relationship when your loved one is unhealthy. What does that look like?
This really kind of leans towards the nature of relationships, like for all human beings with all people, is that we're having a relationship with a perception, with a projection of our own mind, So, quite often I'll say to parents, what would it say about you if your child stopped taking drugs? What would it say for you? What would it do for you? And it's kind of like, they say, oh, do this, you do that. And it's kind of like, yeah, but nothing outside of you can change your internal world. Only you're looking inwardly and understanding what it is you're projecting outwardly onto them and what you're giving them the power to mean for you. Like you can just take that back. You can change that belief, that idea. It's like you can be free without them getting clean.
That's
And
right.
people are like, really? Really, I can be free? Because it really looks like my freedom depends on my child stopping using, but that's not true. You can be free without any change in their behavior because it even looks to me like common sense. I don't know if it's just because I've been teaching this for so long, but it looks to me that common sense that that my freedom can't be dependent on someone else.
Especially when we're new to this, and especially
Yeah,
if we can grow up around this,
yeah.
So, and here's what I learned the very hard way. I had a gentleman, I was on the Governor's Recovery Task Force Commission, and he never had children, and he was a person in recovery. And he said, so I represented families for the state of New Hampshire. And he said, you know what's wrong with you parents? You do what you do to make you feel better.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I know, but I didn't like that. It's not what I wanted to hear. And I tell you, I was pissed off.
Mm,
I couldn't even look at this guy for like 6 months.
mm,
And then I really digested it. And
mm,
I really let it go through and figured out my why. Why did I do everything that I did for him? Why did I pay off his drug dealers? Why did I do this? Because it did make me feel better.
mm,
Because I thought I could love him into recovery,
mm.
and I couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing. So it comes to acceptance, right? We all, whether it's a person in active addiction that's working their way into recovery, and it's a parent who loves them, coming to a place of acceptance. You get to live your life the way you want to live your life. And I can figure out how can I accept that and live my life being healthy and happier.
That's such a challenge, isn't it? I do know people that are still stuck in that and can't change. They're really unwilling to come out of it. It's like because they fear for the worst, right? Because that's the fear, right? Isn't it? If I stop, we don't call it enabling, but it's like if I stop enabling, basically, it's kind of like then my child might die, or something might happen to
That's the
them, and it's
greatest
like
fear.
that's a lot of like it's a lot of weight to pull you in a direction. It's kind of like of continuing your behavior even though it's detrimental. I always say I was grateful. My mum, she kicked me out. She said, I'm done with you, don't come back to this house, I'll call the police, she said to me, if you come back, and that was it. And it was like that was a very early age. And I was not allowed in the house from being probably midway through my teens. She even bought me a caravan to live in because she wanted to support me on this land, but she didn't want me in the house. It's like
Yeah.
because nothing was safe. I used to take everything.
Yeah.
Um, so I could see her battle with trying to support me and find a way to keep me safe, but also not wanting me and in a direct kind of contact way. And that was now when I look back, I think that was probably one of the best things that she ever did for me.
And it's not that she didn't want you. It was her safety in her
Yeah,
heart that she had to
yeah,
learn to protect.
yeah,
And it's finding that balance. How
yeah.
do we find our balance and come to a place of acceptance and learn to love our loved ones in active addiction unconditionally? That's a lot. That's hard to do. And it takes time. I went through it for 10 years, and it took me 8 out of the 10 to figure it out. And I'm still figuring it out. Even though
Yeah.
my son's 17 years in recovery, I'm still seeing things like, oh, geez, that wasn't cool that I did that.
Yeah.
We all have to take responsibility for what comes out of our mouth and our behaviors as well, right? Because we hurt people. We say stuff that we shouldn't say, and which doesn't help a person in active addiction, and sometimes I think as parents, the anger, that the fear, I think it's the fear and the anguish of losing our loved ones, that we say stuff in hopes that no matter what we say, we're gonna like knock it out of them. It's like military, you knock them down and build them back up, right?
Yeah.
And what a mess we make.
Yeah. Well, lately I've started to realize that when we actually see that we can't do anything, and we find a bit of freedom and peace in that, that's just the start of the journey, not the end. Like for many years, it looked like that would be the end. If I could just be detached from this, or for the person using, if I could just stop using, then I'd be free. I say that those 2 points are the start of a different journey. They're not the
Right,
end of the road. They're not freedom and bliss forever. Amen. They're like
right.
the start of a different journey of actually looking inwardly and taking responsibility for yourself and your own emotions, and no longer pointing the finger, blaming everyone else and trying to get other people to do things to make us okay. That's a different journey. And like that has many obstacles too. We meet people, we find relationships, we come into contact with financial difficulties and struggles, and our body and our health, and things happen. And then we're challenged again, to continue to look inwardly and to take responsibility for our emotions rather than blame the system or someone else or a job or a boss or a girlfriend or something. It's like, so the journey continues through life. It's not the end of the road to realize we're going in the right direction. It's just the start, of a new journey, which carries on as I see it forever. The healing journey just goes on, and we're all
Mm.
susceptible to getting it wrong in a moment of trigger of reaction of the nervous system and going into fight or flight and getting angry or something. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, and do you believe that when somebody, well, whether the family member or the person with a substance use disorder, that their nervous system, like going to a chiropractor, can help them with their nervous system to chill things out, to make adjustments so that they're not so much in that fight or flight mode?
I don't know about a chiropractor, but I would certainly say that from a physical tension point of view, more muscular and physiological, like a physio or something, or a massage, even sports massage, deep tissue massage, any of those things, because what we've learned quite often is to detach. Like one of the first things I'll do with people is get them back into their body, because they're completely like a walking head. Like, well, I'm feeling this and I'm feeling this and I'm feeling this. And I say, well, how do you know you're feeling it? And they're going, well, I just have the thought that I'm feeling it, everything. So I said, what's going on below here? And they're like, nothing. It's like nothing's going on here. I'm okay. But like what they don't realize is but they'll say to you, I've got a bad back and I've got eczema and I've got chronic fatigue and I'm taking painkillers for this and that. But they're not related. They don't actually know that the body has adapted to hold tensions in the neck, in the jaw, in the
Mm,
forehead, in the back. And it's like, and that has created their physical pain or their skin conditions and so on, because that amount of cortisol in the system when we're constantly in a stress response hormone place in our body is eating away, is catabolic. There might be a small real physical issue, but it's exacerbated by the fact that cortisol's in the system on a consistent basis. So then once you start going to those type of practitioners and starting to feel your body again and loosen up, some people report going for a massage and burst into tears. And it's because it
mm,
was so busy holding tension and emotion in the trap or in the shoulder or something that when they worked on it, it just released a flood of tears. So, yeah,
mm.
the body mind for me is one word. It's inseparable. It's all completely there, and whatever's going on in the mind and so on in the nervous system, it's all completely and directly connected. They're not separate.
Yeah, yeah. I know for me, I carry it here, which I think a lot of women do. And I used to have to remind myself to breathe. I was always
Mm,
holding my breath. And I ended up starting with Reiki, and it was a flood of tears
yeah,
because you finally like let it go. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh boy. As we wrap up, Any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
I think while we're on that subject, what came to mind was that there are actually studies from the Polyvagal Institute, Stephen Porges and stuff, that's a famous kind of traumatologist. I quite like following their stuff, but they actually reckon now that 80% of experience comes from the bottom up. It comes, so the nervous system perceives through what Stephen Porges calls neuroception. So it's like what we might call perception of the mind. Like I interpret what you said in a certain way. But neuroception is the perception through the body senses of threat to the current stimulus, i.e., another person, a girlfriend, a financial threat, whatever it is, and then contracted, contorted, constricted, whatever happens in the body, then the thoughts come in service of that, So 80% of experience, it says in those studies, is coming from the bottom up, not from the top down, like, i.e., I am this, you are that, not from the thinking mind, but from the body. So I think somatic work is my, what I'd leave people with is look more to the body, because many people come to me, they've got no clue. They're like, what do you mean the body? It's kind of like, what about it? And to get back reconnected to your body, to your own beauty, to your own tenderness, to your own sensitivity, that all is experienced in the body as a physical sensation, not in the head, then that's part of the healing journey. And it's very beautiful to become reconnected to those parts of yourself that were fragmented as a safety mechanism, and to sort of become whole again, so to speak.
Yeah. So how would people get in touch with you if they would like to hire you or get your future book, any of your information?
Yeah, infiniterecoveryproject.com is my website. I'm about to launch a new website soon, in the next week or two, for the book. The book's probably going to be released in the next month or so. It's finished. So everything's going to happen. Or you can find me on Facebook, Infinite Recovery Project. That's it, really. It's kind of like those are what I'm going to be doing, in the world. I'm just about to launch a YouTube channel and a TikTok channel and different things. So there's all sorts of stuff going on.
Well, thank you so much. It's been
Thank
a
you.
pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for what you do for the world. I think it's valuable, and it's essential, and it's priceless to somebody.
Ditto. Same
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to support the Sharing Without Shame podcast, please subscribe, like, and leave a review. If you're in need of emotional support, Donna offers private sessions. For more information about Donna and the services she offers, visit www.sharingwithoutshame.com or email her at Donna4support@comcast.net. Nothing in the Sharing Without Shame podcast is intended to establish a therapist-patient relationship or intended to replace the services of a trained therapist, doctor, or health professional, or substitute for professional mental health, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Until next time, may your faith and strength heal your heart.